The alien princess despised humanity until I saved her little sister. Have you ever wondered what happens when the most superior being in the galaxy is forced to face the truth that they were wrong? A single look of disdain, an alien princess, a younger sister trapped inside a forbidden death zone where no one dares to enter. So how did a low-level technician like me become the only one brave enough, or maybe just insane enough, to confront what even the immortal Velarion fear? And why did I have to sacrifice the most precious memory of my life just to save someone who once despised everything I stood for? The alien princess despised humanity until I saved her little sister. Blue blood dripped onto my shoulder, heavy, scalding, nothing like human blood, thicker, darker, flowing down my back like shimmering streams under the emergency lights. I'll never forget the look in her eyes that day. Disdain, as if I were something lesser, as if simply sharing the same air with me was an unbearable insult to her existence. Princess Ceralia Velarion, a daughter of a civilization that conquered the stars while our ancestors still fumbled with wheels and fire. Her deep violet eyes pierced through me like I was an insect beneath a microscope. "You humans," she once said, her voice colder than the void, "are better suited as laborers than allies." And yet it was me, a nobody, a maintenance technician, who carried her sister out of hell. Velarion lay limp across my back as I dragged myself through the collapsing corridor. Her delicate wings were torn, hanging down like blood-soaked foil. Her frail body felt like lead in my arms. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. They called us scum, unevolved apes, creatures ruled by instinct, not intellect. But that day, only I dared to enter the death zone. Not the noble Velarion knights with their godlike tech, not the elite royal guards in their biosuits. Me, just me, a single human in a torn hazmat suit with one reason to come back alive. I'd learned a lot about the Velarion during my time under their condescending gaze. They could live for centuries. They could move objects with their minds. They created tech we still called magic. But they didn't know how to save a life, not when it meant sacrificing their pride. When I stepped out of the radiation zone, Velarion unconscious on my back, I saw her, Ceralia, standing just beyond the safe line, her beautiful face twisted into something I'd never seen before. Fear, hope, and something deeper, something more human. If you want to know what happened next, how a lowly technician like me managed to change the mind of an alien princess about an entire species, I'll tell you, but let me warn you, this isn't a love story among the stars. It's a story about worth, about sacrifice, and how sometimes recognition doesn't come from those who are like you, but from those who are the most different. When humanity first reached beyond Mars, we thought we were great explorers, the Columbuses of the stars. We were wrong. The universe had already been charted. The roads were drawn, the borders established, the alliances long formed, the Unified Galactic Accord. That's what we called it, though their original term carried nuances of biological harmony and shared psychic frequencies. 7 major species, 23 minor races, and hundreds of smaller satellite civilizations. A political order that had remained stable for over 20,000 Earth years. And then we showed up. Loud, disorganized, greedy, aggressive. Children barging into a boardroom of ancient beings, shouting about how we just invented the wheel. "Congratulations," they said with bored tones. "Now get in line and wait your turn." That was when we learned our place in the galactic hierarchy at the very bottom. The newcomers, the inferiors, the primitives. Of all the Accord's races, none looked down on humanity more than the Velarion. They were the pinnacle of civilized space, and they knew it. Velarion, the name rolls off the tongue in 3 soft syllables, as if even language bows before their presence. I still remember the first time I saw one. You can't prepare for that moment. Translucent wings like silk membranes, glowing faintly as they moved. Skin of shimmering blue-silver, like it had been woven from dead stars. Their eyes, large with no whites, were pools of shifting color that changed with emotion. I've seen deep violet fade into blue when they were thinking, and flash crimson when they were angry. Velarion live for an average of 900 Earth years. They don't age like we do. They phase. Their bodies progress through 5 distinct stages, each lasting about 2 centuries. In the third phase, called the Epoch of Creation, their intellect peaks, capable of solving equations that would take our best quantum computers decades to process. And yet, they're the most fractured civilization I've ever seen. Their caste system isn't just strict, it's foundational. 7 primary castes, each subdivided into 23 tiers. Your place is set from birth, determined by lineage, wing hue, and most importantly, the purity of your biotonal frequency. A concept our scientists are still trying to understand. The Velarion royal family, Sirelia and Lyrion's lineage, sits at the very top, not just among Velarion, but across the entire Accord. They don't rule in the way we think of power. They harmonize and coordinate, or so they say. In truth, their authority is absolute and unquestioned. Honor is everything, a Velarion once told me when I asked about their core values. Honor isn't something you feel, it's what you are. Lose it and you lose yourself. To the Velarion, emotion, especially the raw, visible kind we humans express, is a sign of evolutionary immaturity. They don't feel like we do. They calibrate. They attune. Crying is shameful. Laughing out loud is vulgar. Romantic love, the kind we celebrate in stories and film, is to them a primitive mating instinct wrapped in poetic lies. You humans are still too close to your animal nature, the Velarion ambassador declared in his first speech on Earth. You have much growing to do, but we are patient. We've seen others evolve from your state. That was the world I stepped into when I was chosen as one of the few human technicians aboard the Velarion mothership Australis Prime, a world where I was ranked below cleaning drones, where I had to lower my eyes when a Velarion passed, where my laughter was considered acoustic pollution and punishable by law. I still remember my first step onto the deck of Australis Prime. The air was lighter, sweeter. It made my head spin. Soft light rippled across the ship's living walls, making it feel like I'd walked into a dream. I looked up at the artificial sky and saw stars, not projections, but real views into space, protected only by invisible force fields. Velarion don't create false skies, my supervisor told me. They believe imitating nature is a sin. They live with the universe, not in replicas of it. That was my first day in a world completely alien, a world where I'd learned that sometimes those who seem the most perfect hide the deepest flaws, and where one proud princess would be forced to face the truth that a being's worth isn't found in their bloodline or their power, but in the choices they make when everything else falls apart. I'm not a hero, not a genius, not an elite astronaut or a brilliant diplomat. My name is Marcus Reeves, 34 years old, Level 3 maintenance technician from Sector 9 Europa Station, a space mechanic if you want to dress it up. On paper, my record's unimpressive. Graduated with average scores from Armstrong Technical Institute, 2018 vision after standard correction surgery. No genetic enhancements, which is rare these days, when most of my co-workers can see in the dark or react twice as fast as normal humans. Natural genome, a recruiting officer once scribbled in my file, underlined. Still not sure if that was a plus or a minus. The only reason I was chosen for the Interstellar Exchange Program was my 3 years of experience working with bioenergy systems, the kind the Velarion use extensively. Well, that and something most people don't know. I have an unusually high tolerance for long-term stress, what the psychologists called exceptional psychological resilience. They didn't know where it came from. But I did. 7 years ago, I was a young tech aboard the rescue vessel Mercy 9. Our mission to retrieve a survey team trapped in a solar storm near Mercury. When the evac team brought them on board, one of them was Maya, my sister, a planetary geologist. That's when everything went to hell. The solar flare was stronger than predicted. The radiation shielding overloaded. I had to reroute power, either to the main deck where 30 people waited, or to the auxiliary medbay, where Maya and 2 others were recovering. I chose the main deck. It was the right call by every protocol, every logic model, but it was also the choice that cost me my sister. Maya understood. In her final moments through the comm screen, she smiled at me. "You didn't have a choice, Marcus. You did the right thing." After that, I resigned from rescue ops. I couldn't keep doing a job that asked me to make those decisions, but the universe still needed people to fix things. So I moved to maintenance. Safe, predictable, and far from life or death choices. Until the Velarion assignment came along. "Why do you want this job?" That's what the HR director asked during my interview. I didn't talk about my fascination with alien tech, didn't mention the career boost. Instead, I told him the simplest truth. Because we need to understand them, and they need to understand us. Maybe that's why I got picked. Too practical to impress, too honest to ignore. On my first day aboard Australis Prime, I was given a small room in the technician sector, far from the main corridors. My uniform, a pale gray jumpsuit with a rust-colored stripe across the shoulder, marking me as alien, human, in bottom-tier crew. "Don't make eye contact with anyone wearing a violet band," my orientation officer warned. "Never touch them, even if they are about to fall. Don't speak unless spoken to. And most importantly, never, ever show too much emotion." My job on paper was simple. Maintain the auxiliary energy systems in the technical zones, areas the Velarion deemed too insignificant for their attention. In practice, it was a maze, half human tech, half alien biology, a tangle of mechanical joints and semi-organic systems we barely understood. Each day began when the biosynthetic lights turned soft green, the Velarion's version of dawn. I grabbed a quick breakfast in the technician canteen, then got my task list from an Archean foreman, a friendly, spider-like species, longtime allies of the Velarion. Then came 8 hours of crawling through conduits, recalibrating circuits, tuning power membranes, and cleaning biofluid tanks. Hard, monotonous work, usually alone, surrounded by the low hum of machinery and the gentle warmth of biotubes. Now and then, I'd run into other techs, mostly from other lesser species in the Accord, who shared humanity's low-ranking status. "They call us the impatient ones," a Tressian tech once told me over lunch, his small platinum body glowing faintly as he spoke. "They don't understand why we're always in such a hurry to change things. Our lives are just a blink to the Velarion. They don't feel urgency like we do." For my first 3 months, I never saw a high-ranking Velarion up close. They were distant shadows at the ends of long corridors. Glimmering wings, graceful movements, always absorbed in duties far above my understanding. Until one day, while repairing a damaged relay in an isolated section, I heard laughter. Clear, genuine laughter. Something I'd never heard on this ship. I made the mistake of peeking around the corner. That was the first time I saw Lyrian, and the first time I met Cerelia, who looked at me as if I were lower than the dust beneath her feet. But that's a story for later. What matters now is this. I'm not a hero, I'm just a technician. A man who's lost too much to let another life slip away, even if that life belonged to someone who despised everything I represent. Because in the end, that's what separates us from the stars and stone. The ability to choose to do what's right, even when no one expects us to. Princess Cerelia Velarion entered the Accord Council chamber like a cold wind. Even the most seasoned diplomatic envoys stopped speaking, standing a little straighter as she passed. Not because of protocol or law, but because no one could ignore the energy she radiated. I first saw her during a technical briefing, a place where royalty was never expected to show. But Cerelia was a creature of detail, and Australis Prime was her responsibility. She was tall, even by Velarion standards, nearly 2 meters, her wings folded neatly behind her, forming a soft, glowing cloak of turquoise light. Her silver-white hair, a mark of royal blood, was tied high in a sculpted twist, held in place by cylindrical pins made of a metal I'd never seen on Earth. But it was her eyes I couldn't forget, deep violet, like Jupiter's twilight, flecked with tiny lights that shimmered like falling stars. "Report the underperformance of the Northern Technical Wing," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Why has plasma flow efficiency dropped by 0.27%? The Arxian foreman trembled on all 8 limbs. "Your Highness, we're currently addressing—" "I didn't ask for justification," Sirelia snapped. "I want to know when it will be fixed." "Within 48 hours, Your Highness." 24. She didn't wait for a reply before moving on to the next topic. That was Sirelia, coldly efficient, terrifyingly intelligent. She wasn't the official ruler of the ship. Her father, Grand Duke Thalanil, held that title. But as First Princess and Ambassador of Interstellar Affairs, Sirelia was the one who truly ran things, and no one dared challenge her authority. I'd heard of her long before I met her. Sirelia, the one who once declared at an Accord summit, "Humans are better suited as laborers than allies. They live too briefly to grasp the complexities of the galaxy and are too governed by emotion to make lasting decisions." Her words sparked protests across 3 Earth colonies. But to the Velarion, it wasn't an insult. It was a clinical assessment. It was how they saw the universe. People said Sirelia was in the second phase of the Velarion life cycle, the phase of understanding, roughly 240 years old by our count. That phase marked the peak of analytical clarity before the next stage, when wisdom and empathy began to develop. She was the embodiment of flawless logic, unclouded by feeling. A soft giggle behind me pulled me from my focus on Sirelia. In the corner of the room, a much younger Velarion covered her mouth, trying to stifle her laughter. Her wings, smaller, more translucent, a softer shade of blue, quivered with each stifled chuckle. Her eyes weren't violet, but a bright emerald green, sparkling with amusement. Lyrian Velarion, Sirelia's younger sister, and possibly the most unusual member of the Velarion royal family in modern history. "May I step out for a moment, sister?" Lyrian asked, her voice like crystal chimes. "This meeting is just very technical." Sirelia gave her a sidelong glance, the faintest flicker of disapproval in her violet eyes. "Stay. Learn. This is our duty." "We're discussing plasma degradation rates, sister," Lyrian whispered, but not quietly enough. "I'm not even sure if that's something you eat or breathe." A hint of humor, practically taboo among the purest Velarion. Sirelia ignored it, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. Lyrian's presence clearly irritated her. Unlike her sister, Lyrian was still in her first life phase, the phase of discovery. Around 60 Earth years old, barely more than a child by their standards, and she acted like it, curious, eager, and sometimes dangerously impatient. Most Velarion looked down on humanity. Lyrian was fascinated by us. I'd heard rumors, how she'd sneak into the tech wings, asking questions about Earth, our food, our music, our customs, how she'd learned human slang, even though it was considered a corruption of proper language. Even during that meeting, I saw her eyes constantly scanning the room, studying us, the human techs, with open, unfiltered curiosity. There was no contempt, no revulsion, just interest. "You," Sirelia said suddenly, locking her gaze on me. The room froze. Human technician. Step forward. I'd made the mistake of staring too long. Heart pounding, I stepped forward, bowing my head as protocol demanded. "Do you have experience with plasma cooling systems?" "Yes, Your Highness," I answered, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "I worked with similar systems on Europa Station." "Similar systems," she echoed, a faint smirk forming. "As if your primitive technology could compare to ours." She turned to the foreman. "Assign this one to the plasma issue. Let's see if their basic skills prove useful." My face burned, not from the insult, I was used to that, but from the opportunity, a chance to prove myself, even in the smallest task. As I stepped back to my position, eyes downcast, I caught Lyrian's gaze. Unlike her sister, she didn't look through me. She looked at me, and she smiled, a real smile, not the polite nod Velarion gave each other. That was the first moment I realized not all Velarion were the same, that maybe the walls between us weren't as impenetrable as they seemed. Of course, Sirelia didn't agree. To her, those walls needed reinforcement, not dismantling. And I, a human technician, was the embodiment of everything she disdained. Humans, I once heard her say to another ambassador, take pride in their emotions as if it's an achievement. They don't realize that emotion is merely a transitional tool, useful only until reason evolves. We moved beyond that stage millennia ago. It was a belief Sirelia held with absolute conviction, and it would be tested utterly when disaster struck. When no amount of logic or intellect could save the one she loved most, and when the only hope left was a crude, emotional human, guided by instinct, and a code of ethics written not in bloodlines or birthright, but in choice. The plasma issue wasn't as simple as I thought. It wasn't just a matter of tuning mechanical systems. The Velarion infrastructure was semi-organic, biocell membranes laced with nanometal filaments, forming a network far more complex than anything we used on Europa Station. It took me 3 days, working nearly non-stop, pausing only to eat and catch a few hours of sleep. In the end, I found the cause. A strand of protective microorganisms within the plasma stream had mutated, forming a secondary filter that slowed energy flow. Not a mechanical failure, a biological one. That's why I was in the biolab when it happened. A place I normally wasn't authorized to enter. But with a direct assignment from Sirelia herself, no one dared to stop me. I was crouched beneath the console, wiring in an analyzer to scan the plasma sample, when I heard footsteps. Light. Too light to be an adult Velarion. Too eager. So this is the human technician everyone's been talking about. The voice behind me was bright, curious, and unmistakably familiar. The one solving the problem none of our engineers could figure out. I turned too fast, banged my head against the console. Eyes watering, I surfaced to find Velarion standing there, her green eyes wide with delight. "Your Highness," I stammered, bowing quickly. "I didn't know you were here." "Oh, don't worry," she waved it off, her delicate wings fluttering. "I'm not supposed to be here. My sister would kill me if she knew I was wandering around alone." She looked around the lab with open wonder. "But isn't that how you discover the best things? By going where you're not supposed to?" I hesitated. Protocol said I shouldn't speak unless spoken to, but remaining silent in front of a royal could also be seen as disrespectful. Velarion didn't wait for a response. She stepped up to the analyzer, tilting her head as the data scrolled across the screen. "Is this a scan of the mutated microorganisms?" There was genuine insight in her question, and it caught me off guard. "Yes, Your Highness," I replied. "I discovered a strain in the plasma forming a secondary membrane." "Oh, like a plastic film over water!" She clapped her hands, excited. "And you're from Earth, right? I've read about your planet. You actually have things called dogs and cats? Creatures that live in your homes just so you can pet them?" Her enthusiasm made me smile. "Yes, Your Highness. I had a cat when I was little." "That's amazing!" Her eyes sparkled. "I read they make a vibrating sound when they're happy. That's incredible. Why don't we Velarion have companion animals like that?" "Maybe because you don't need them," I said, then quickly added, "Your Highness." "Don't need friendship? That's absurd," she scoffed. "Everyone needs friends, even—" She didn't finish the sentence. A loud bang echoed from the far end of the lab. One of the main plasma chambers was shaking. Its safety valve popped open, pressure surging. Smaller tubes cracked, leaking glowing blue liquid. No one else was in the lab, just me and Velarion, and something was definitely going wrong. "Your Highness, get back!" I shouted, forgetting every rule. I lunged forward, pulling her away from the station just as one of the glass tubes exploded. Shards sprang through the air. Instinctively, I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her from the blast. A second later, I realized what I'd done. I had touched a member of the Velarion royal family, the most forbidden act imaginable. I released her immediately, taking a step back. "Your Highness, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... What are you doing here?" The icy voice froze us both. Cyrilia stood in the lab entrance, her presence sharp and fearsome. Her violet eyes had darkened to near black. "Cyrilia," Velarion gasped. "It was just a small plasma issue. This technician..." "Silence," Cyrilia snapped, stepping forward like a warrior, not a diplomat. "He touched you." "Only to pull me out of danger," Velarion protested. "The debris was..." "I said silence." Her voice thundered, and the entire room seemed to tremble. "You were taught never to enter restricted zones, and you..." She turned to me, fury in every syllable. "You dared lay a hand on a royal?" "Your Highness," I bowed deeper. "I was only trying to protect..." "I don't care what you were trying to do," she cut me off. "Who are you to decide my sister needed protecting? Do you think your short-lived kind understands the value of Velarion life more than we do?" By now, a few Velarion engineers and security personnel had gathered at the door, drawn by the commotion. Cyrilia stepped closer, towering over me. Her expression burned with disdain. "But he saved me!" Velarion cried out. Her wings flared wide, an emotional outburst rare among the Velarion. "Enough," Cyrilia snapped. "Say another word, and I'll report this to Father." That shut Velarion down immediately. Her wings drooped in silence. Cyrilia tore the technician's badge from my uniform, ripping the fabric in the process. "You're no longer permitted in this sector. You will not approach any member of the royal family, especially my sister." "Your Highness, I completed the task you assigned me," I said, not to defend myself, but to fulfill my duty. "I identified the plasma issue and found a solution." "I don't care," she said coldly. "A Velarion engineer will take over. We don't need help from lesser beings who act on instinct instead of reason." She turned to the guards. "Escort him back to the tech ward. Restrict his access." I didn't resist as the guards led me away. There was no point in arguing. There'd be no trial, no appeal process. This was their world, their rules. As I was led out, I glanced over my shoulder. Velarion was staring at me, eyes full of guilt and sorrow. She gave the smallest of bows, an almost imperceptible gesture of gratitude and apology. Behind her, Cyrilia stood like a statue, her wings folded perfectly, her face unreadable. But something flickered behind her cold gaze. Something more than contempt, suspicion, wariness, as if I wasn't just a nuisance, but a threat. I didn't understand it then. I was just a low-level technician doing my job, hardly worth the attention of a Velarion princess. But later I would understand. It wasn't me she feared. It was my influence on Velarion. The danger of ideas, of friendship, of seeing the universe through a different lens. And maybe, deep down, she was unsettled. Because in that critical moment, it wasn't the noble sister who had protected Velarion. It was a flawed, emotional human. At the time, all I knew was that I'd lost a rare privilege, that I'd made an enemy of one of the most powerful beings on the ship. And I could only hope it wouldn't endanger the entire interstellar exchange. What I didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The first step toward a choice I could never have imagined. A choice that would change Cyrilia's view of humanity forever. 2 weeks after the incident in the lab, I was reassigned to the lowest tier maintenance zone aboard Australis Prime. What we technicians called the Dead Core. You wouldn't find that name in any official document, of course, but that's what it was to us. The Dead Core had once been the ship's original command center. The first part of Australis Prime ever built, nearly a millennium ago. Now it was mostly abandoned, just ancient piping and backup energy grids still running through it, like the last few veins in a dying body. "Don't worry," said Dax, a Tressian technician, trying to comfort me as I took on the assignment. "No one survives making Princess Cyrilia angry. At least you still have a job." I nodded, and I was grateful for that. Even if the job was the worst one available, the Dead Core wasn't just old, it was dangerous. Narrow corridors, flickering lights, and a constant hum from ancient pumps deep below. But the worst threat was the residual radiation. Not enough to kill you on the spot, but more than enough to make sure you didn't stay long. Wear a rad suit every time you check the main conduits, my new supervisor warned. And stay out of Zone 7. Never go in there. Why? I asked. Radiation's too high. No one's allowed, not even the Velarion. That section's been sealed since the Khaleesi War. Zone 7, the forbidden part of the Forbidden Zone. I saw it once from a distance. A massive sealed chamber behind thick metal doors, plastered with warning signs in at least 10 different languages. I'd come to terms with my new fate, working in isolation, in the dark. But fate, as it turns out, had other plans. On my 10th day in the dead core, an alarm went off. Not a standard ship alert, but a low guttural wail reserved for only the gravest emergencies. I was inspecting an old coolant pump when the entire system flashed red. The voice of the emergency system rang out in 3 languages: Velarion, Standard Accord, and finally English. Security alert level 1. All personnel report to stations. Lockdown in effect. This is not a drill. My heart pounded. Level 1. The highest threat level. Even in drills, I'd never heard it used. I rushed to the nearest tech control station. Screens were flashing red. Supervisors and technicians were already gathered, faces tense. What's happening? I asked Dax, who was staring at the largest monitor. Something's going on near Zone 7, he said, voice tight. The whole section's been locked down. On the screen, we saw a squad of Velarion guards approaching the area. But not the standard guards. These were elite, clad in full-body biosuits and armed with high-energy weapons. Suddenly, a priority alert scrolled across the screen. First in Velarion, then automatically translated, Alert, Princess Lyrian missing, last seen near Zone 7, priority search initiated. The room erupted in hushed whispers. Lyrian, near Zone 7. That was impossible. No one was allowed down here, especially not royalty. She's wandered before, someone muttered. Too curious for her own good. But why Zone 7? Another whispered. Even the royals know to stay clear of that place. Biometric data shows she's still alive, the supervisor said, pointing to a blinking set of vitals on the side monitor. But she's inside Zone 7, and the radiation levels are rising. Why don't they just go in and get her? I asked. The supervisor looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Zone 7 is a death zone. Even in the best biosuits, you'd last minutes. That's why it's sealed. We watched helpless as the elite guards approached the boundary of Zone 7 and stopped. They couldn't go in, no one could. Then another figure appeared on the screen, moving too fast for the security cameras to track. Cyrelia. She flew through the corridors like a storm, wings spread wide in a way I'd never seen before. There was no grace, no control, only panic. She reached the squad, spoke to them. We couldn't hear her words, but her body said it all. She was begging them to go in, begging them to walk into certain death for her sister. The guards hesitated. Even the best among them knew it would be suicide. They would die and they wouldn't reach her in time. Why don't they send in drones? Someone asked. Radiation shorts out anything mechanical, Dax explained. That's why we fix the conduits by hand. On the screen, Cyrelia began removing a guard's armor. No, the supervisor whispered, realization dawning. She's going to go in herself. And she was. She intended to walk into death to save her sister. The squad commander blocked her path, trying to reason with her. She shoved him aside, her face contorted in rage and desperation. Even through the camera, I could see her eyes shift to deep crimson, a color reserved only for the most extreme emotions. A shame among Velarion. Then, a sharp explosion rocked the dead core. Cameras flickered, scrambled, then returned. Dust and debris swirling around the entrance to Zone 7. What was that? I asked, panicked. Radiation spike, the supervisor replied, pointing at the readings. Looks like the sealed door was breached. Radiation is leaking out. He activated the evacuation alert. All personnel evacuate! Now! Lock down the entire core! Everyone scattered, but I stood there, staring at the screen. At Cyrelia, now on her knees, her wings collapsed in despair. Even with all her power, with the best warriors at her side, she still couldn't save her sister. Another message flashed across the screen from the risk analysis unit. Projection: radiation levels in Zone 7 will reach lethal threshold in 3 hours. Containment protocols initiated. Velarion would be dead in 3 hours, and no one could stop it. As people shoved past me toward the exits, my eyes fell on a smaller screen. A detailed schematic of Zone 7. No one else noticed, but I did. The dead core in Zone 7 were the oldest parts of the ship, built using the same design as Europa Station, where I'd once worked. And if the design held true, there was a maintenance conduit, a narrow path used long ago, before the radiation made it obsolete. There were no cameras on me. No one saw as I copied the coordinates onto my personal device. "Marcus, come on!" Dax yelled from the doorway. "Go ahead," I said. "I need to grab my toolkit." I didn't know why I lied. Why instead of running to safety, I went the opposite direction. Back to my quarters to retrieve an old, barely functional radiation suit. The kind we wore when working on the main pipes. And I really didn't know why. As the evacuation alarm blared, I slipped away, heading toward the one place no sane creature would ever go. Maybe it was the look on Cerelia's face. Desperation I never thought I'd see from a Velarion. Maybe it was Velarion, the only one who had ever treated me like a person, not a tool. Maybe it was Maya, my sister, the one I couldn't save that day on Mercy 9. Maybe I just couldn't bear to watch history repeat itself. Whatever the reason, I found myself standing before a dusty panel, hidden in some forgotten alcove of the dead core. According to the map, this was it. The beginning of the old maintenance shaft. A path into hell. What kind of creature does this? A cold voice came from behind me. I turned to find Cerelia, no longer flawless, no longer regal, her wings tattered, her eyes bloodshot from grief and rage. "You'll die in there," she said, her voice raw. "The radiation will kill you in minutes." "This suit will buy me enough time," I replied, gesturing to the gear. "Not enough to get back out." "Maybe not." "Why?" she asked, and for the first time I saw true confusion in a Velarion's eyes. "Why would you do this? My sister means nothing to you. I punished you. I humiliated you. Why would you risk your life?" I met her gaze. I didn't bow, didn't look away. "Because it's the right thing to do." She recoiled as if I'd struck her. In her universe, choices were never that simple. There was always calculation, always gain, always a cost-benefit analysis. "I could order you to stop," she said after a long silence. "You could," I nodded, fitting the breather mask onto my face. "But it won't change the fact that this is her only chance." She said nothing as I opened the panel, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel, so tight I'd have to crawl. A cold wind swept out, heavy with the scent of metal and time. "If you find her," she began to speak, then stopped. Even with all her mastery of language, she had no words for this moment. There was no Velarion protocol for thanking a human. "I'll try to bring her back," I said quietly, and crawled into the darkness, toward the heart of Zone 7, toward a place no one had ever returned from. My Geiger counter began to chirp, and I hadn't even made it halfway. The maintenance tunnel ran like a narrow artery through the dead core of the ship. With every meter I crawled, my Geiger counter grew louder, the slow beeping turning into a continuous shriek. My old radiation suit wasn't made for this. It was designed for quick repairs near plasma conduits, not for venturing deep into a death zone. I knew I was gambling with time. By my estimate, I had maybe 30 minutes before the dose became lethal, 40 if I was lucky. After that, there was no cure. Not with human medicine, not even with Velarion technology. "Why are you doing this?" Cerelia's voice echoed in my mind. Why would I, a lowly technician, freshly demoted, risk my life for a Velarion princess I barely knew? The answer I'd given, because it's the right thing to do, wasn't the whole truth. There was something deeper, something personal. I couldn't save Maya, and I couldn't watch someone else die when I had a chance, however slim, of changing that. Pale green bioluminescence coated the tunnel walls as I drew closer to Zone 7. I flicked on my headlamp, only to see the passage branch in multiple directions. Damn it, I muttered into my mask. No map, no guidance. I pulled out my scanner, checked Velariion's biometric signal. Faint, but still there. Mostly centered in the northern quadrant of the zone. I took the left fork and followed it. The tunnel widened, opening into a chamber far larger than I had imagined. Zone 7 wasn't just an abandoned lab. It was a city. Domed structures, elevated walkways, and at the center, a massive towering spire. Everything was coated in dust and time-worn decay. What had happened here? The Khaleesi War had clearly left its scars, but why leave it sealed, forgotten, never rebuilt? There was no time to dwell on it. My Geiger counter screamed. I checked my timer. 18 minutes gone. Half my window, gone. I ran, down empty streets, past crumbling structures, toward the biometric signal. The suit was suffocating. Sweat ran down my spine. Every breath burned, but I didn't stop. Near the base of the central tower, I saw the cause of the blast. A portion of the outer wall had collapsed, leaving a gaping hole. And there, amid the rubble, movement. A faint flicker of green, small wings twitching beneath debris. Velarion, I breathed, rushing forward. She lay there, partially pinned beneath heavy shards. Her delicate wings, symbols of Velarion nobility, were shredded. Pale blue blood streamed from a wound on her forehead. She was unconscious, but breathing, barely. "Your Highness?" I called, gently removing the largest chunk of debris. "Princess Velarion, can you hear me?" No response. I checked her vitals. Weak pulse, shallow breaths, no spinal damage, but severe external injuries. Possible internal bleeding. Time was running out, for both of us. I lifted her carefully. She was shockingly light, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. As I turned to leave, I noticed what she'd been reaching for. A device, ancient, still glowing faintly. Its surface bore unfamiliar symbols, but they reminded me of something. The markings on Velarion's wings. Not decoration, I realized. Not art. A key to something hidden in Zone 7. She hadn't come here out of reckless curiosity. She was searching for something important. But now wasn't the time to figure it out. My Geiger counter had gone red. We were out of time. Cradling her in my arms, I turned and ran, back the way I came. Every step a struggle, every breath harder than the last. My vision blurred, the first symptom of acute radiation poisoning. "Keep going," I whispered. "Just keep moving." When I reached the maintenance tunnel, my heart sank. It was too narrow. I couldn't carry her through. I'd have to drag her, which meant her injuries would worsen. There was no choice. I removed the outer layer of my suit, drastically reducing my own protection, and wrapped it around her, a fragile cushion. "Sorry about this, Your Highness," I muttered, knowing she couldn't hear me. "It's not going to be comfortable." I began pulling her through, backwards, one agonizing step at a time, trying not to scrape her torn wings against the metal. Every second I felt myself weakening. Nausea surged. The next stage of radiation sickness, I didn't know if I could make it, let alone carry her all the way. Somewhere between breaths, my mind wandered, back to what Cerelia had said when I entered the tunnel. "You humans," she'd said, her voice still laced with arrogance even in despair, "are always trying to be heroes. That primitive impulse will get you killed." Maybe she was right. Maybe this was just instinct. But if that instinct saved Velarion, then maybe instinct wasn't the curse Velarion believed it to be. The final stretch felt endless. My vision narrowed to a tunnel of light, edges fading, breath shallow, heartbeat erratic. "Almost there," I whispered, to Velarion, to myself. I didn't know. Then, I saw it. Light, the exit. With one final push, I dragged us toward it, every inch a battle. As we neared the opening, I heard it. Voices, shouting, footsteps. Someone was waiting, but they wouldn't come in. No one was that insane. As I crawled out of the tunnel, Lyrian still behind me, I saw a line of Velarion guards in full protective suits. And at the center, Cyrelia, her eyes wide, openly stunned. I managed to whisper, "She needs help, now!" Then everything went black. Hands pulled me away, voices yelling, my mask ripped off, alarms blaring. And in the fog of delirium, I thought I heard something impossible. Cyrelia's voice, no longer cold, no longer distant, but filled with something Velarion never admitted to having. "Save this human." 3 days passed in a fog of pain and static. I awoke in the ship's medbay. Not the human wing, but the primary Velarion recovery chamber. Around me, transparent biomembranes pulsed with faint luminescence, each beat pushing healing energy through my broken body. A Tellurian physician, four-armed, black-eyed, and among the finest medical minds in the Accord, stood at my side, watching me with a quiet curiosity. "Remarkable," he said in a low, gravelly voice. "You're still alive. The radiation you absorbed should have killed even a Velarion." "Lyrian," I whispered. My throat was raw, every syllable a razor. "The princess is recovering," he replied, "undergoing regeneration. Her wings..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They'll take time. Will she fly again?" "Eventually, but that's no longer your concern." That voice, sharp, cold, cutting clean through the room. I turned. Cyrelia stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed, still flawless. But something had changed, a hairline fracture in the mask. Her eyes were no longer cold, but conflicted, guarded. "You broke every protocol," she said. "Entered Zone 7, made contact with my sister, disobeyed a direct council order." I opened my mouth, but she raised a hand. "The council wants your report, every detail. They want to know what happened in Zone 7. I stared at her, confused. "I went in. I found Princess Lyrian. I brought her out." Her gaze tightened. "No, you didn't. You were unconscious for nearly 6 hours in Zone 7, according to your biometrics. And while you were out, you were dreaming, talking about them, about experiments, and something you kept calling the key." I tried to sit up. Pain tore through me like fire. "I don't remember," I whispered. "All I recall is finding her under the rubble, then pulling her out." Cyrelia studied me, searching for lies. Then she motioned to the doctor, who exited without a word. "The council expects your testimony in 2 hours," she said once we were alone. "But I need the truth before they get it. What happened in Zone 7? Did Lyrian say anything to you?" "Nothing," I answered. "She was unconscious when I found her." "Then why," she asked, voice tightening, "did you keep repeating, 'They're coming back,' while delirious? Why did you mention the gate?" I shook my head, truly lost. "Maybe radiation sickness, hallucinations." A flicker of disappointment passed over her face. "Perhaps. Can I ask something?" I said as she turned to leave. She paused, didn't look back. "Why was Zone 7 sealed? What happened there?" She stood still for a long moment. Then, in a voice softer than I'd ever heard from her, "It's where we made our greatest mistake." Then she left, leaving me alone with fragments of memory and 1,000 unanswered questions. It wasn't until night fell, when the ship dimmed into rest cycle, that the memories began to return. Not as clear images, but as scattered shards of a dream. I remembered, not just finding Lyrian under the rubble. There was more. After finding her unconscious, I tried to head back, but the exit tunnel had collapsed in the blast. We were trapped, deep inside Zone 7. Carrying her, I searched for another way out. Moving deeper into the forbidden zone, dim phosphorescent lights lit strange, unfamiliar corridors. A faint hum echoed through the air. Machines, ancient and still alive after centuries. Radiation scorched my skin from the inside, but I pressed on, stumbling through the ruins. Then I saw them, ancient bots, not Velarion tech, not Accord tech, something else. They moved like spiders, skimming walls and ceilings with mechanical precision. Smooth, silent, efficient. I pulled Velarion close, hiding in a crevice, praying their sensors, damaged by time, would miss us. They did, and I moved on. Then I heard the voice. Marcus, Maya's voice, my sister, calling me through a half-open door. Why didn't you save me? I knew it was a hallucination, radiation, exhaustion, but it still cut deep. It wasn't my fault, I whispered, to myself, to Velarion, to Maya. I didn't have a choice. I turned a corner and found it, the core of Zone 7, a massive chamber, dozens of screens surrounding a central pyramid-like structure, all blinking strange symbols, and in the middle, a device. Not Velarion, not a cord, nothing I recognized. A small gateway, still glowing. As I stepped forward, the screens flared to life. And a voice echoed, old, inhuman. Biological sample detected, initiating assessment. From beneath the floor, 4 robotic arms rose, reaching for me and Velarion. I tried to run, but my legs gave out. The world spun. A laser scanned my body, paused at my temple. Compatible technology identified, locating memory structure, initiating extraction. Fire ripped through my skull. They were pulling something out. Memories, Maya, the accident, the choice I had made to save 30 and lose her. Confirmed, decision matrix meets criteria, specimen acceptable. As I collapsed, one of the arms reached for Velarion. A green glow surrounded her, lifting her gently, suspending her inside a glowing cocoon. No! I choked, reaching out. Helpless. The screen shifted. A new message. Proposal, exchange. Submit data to release Velarion specimen. And I understood. The system wanted something from me. Something it had seen in my mind. My memories, my pain, my capacity for sacrifice. There was no other way. Agreed, Alma, I whispered. Exchange confirmed. Full extraction initiated. The pain returned, 100 times worse. I felt them tearing Maya from me. Not just the moment she died, but all of her. Her first birthday, her laugh, our fights, our dreams. All of it, gone, like photographs burned in sunlight. I lost her, again. And then, the cocoon dissolved. Velarion fell gently to the floor. Exchange complete. Evacuation protocol activated. The floor gave way. I was falling, Velarion beside me, sliding through tunnels, spinning through darkness, until we stopped. A small chamber, a door opened, and I saw light, real light, just ahead. The same maintenance shaft I'd entered. The exit, freedom. I held Velarion close, staggering forward. Every step a battle, every breath, agony, and I didn't know why I felt so hollow. Why the sadness pressed down like gravity. I had saved her, but I'd lost something too. There was a hole inside me, a wound deeper than the radiation. I didn't remember Maya. I didn't remember her face. I didn't even remember having a sister. I opened my eyes in the medbay. The memories slammed back into me like a tidal wave. I screamed. The Velarion doctor rushed to my side, injected something into my arm. "You've remembered?" he said quietly. "We feared this might happen." "What was in Zone 7?" I gasped. "That wasn't Velarion tech." "No." The voice came from the doorway. Cyralia, her face drawn, tight with fear. "It was the technology of an enemy we've tried to forget. An enemy Velarion uncovered in ancient records." She stepped closer, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "Now tell me, Marcus Reeves, everything you saw in Zone 7, all of it, because my sister's life may depend on what you remember." The enemy I looked Cyralia straight in the eye. Whatever reverence I might have once had for the Velarion was gone, burned away by everything I'd endured. "The precursors," she said, her violet eyes darkening to near black. "A civilization that existed before the Accord, before even the Velarion. We thought they were long gone. But if what's in Zone 7 is still active..." She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she looked out the window, where the stars glinted silently, ominously. "We need to evacuate," I said. "Warn the Accord." "Not yet," she replied. "I need to be certain. I need to know if that gate really works." A violent explosion rocked the ship. Emergency lights flashed red. "Too late," I whispered. "It's already been activated." Cerelia spun around, her face sharpening with tension. "Seal the medbay. No one in or out." She rushed out, leaving me with the Velarion doctor, who looked no less concerned. "How bad is it?" I asked, forcing myself upright. "Bad," he answered bluntly, "but not terminal. Your cells are self-repairing thanks to Velarion therapy, but you'll need at least 2 more days to—" Another explosion cut him off. The ship's PA system crackled to life. "Intrusion detected. All personnel to secure locations." "This is not a drill." "Velarion," I rasped, realizing where she was. "She's in the regeneration wing, right?" The doctor nodded. "We can't move her. Wing regeneration is in a critical phase." I understood. The Regen wing was on the east side of the medbay. If the threat was coming from Zone 7, its path would pass right through there. Pain ripped through my body as I tore out the IVs and monitoring cables. The Velarion shouted in protest, but I didn't care. Compared to what I'd survived in Zone 7, this was nothing. "You can't go," he said. "You'll die." "Not today," I wheezed, staggering upright. "Not after everything I gave up to save her." My legs trembled, but I pushed forward. In the corridor ahead, a Velarion guard lay dead, his biosuit armor corroded by something I couldn't identify. Not bullets, not lasers, a black energy that still sizzled around the wound. I grabbed his energy rifle. I didn't know if it would work, but it felt better than nothing. The hallway was dark, lit only by emergency lights. I heard the metallic grinding of familiar machines. Guardian bots like the ones in Zone 7, just 2 turns from the Regen wing. I pressed against the wall, moving as quietly as I could. Stealth wasn't my strength, especially not in a hospital gown, but I kept going. I turned the last corner and saw them. 3 bots. Metallic bodies gleaming under red lights, cutting through the door to the Regen chamber. No guards, either reassigned or already down. No time to think. I raised the rifle and fired. Blue energy burst out, hitting the nearest bot. It staggered but didn't fall. All 3 turned. Their limbs shifted, transformed into weapons. I dove as black energy seared past me. Fired again. 2 more shots. 1 bot finally collapsed, sparks flying. The others advanced. Too fast, no other option. I ran straight at the door, firing wildly to cover myself. A bolt grazed my shoulder. Pain lanced down my arm. I screamed, but I didn't stop. "Velarion," I shouted, slamming into the door. "Princess Velarion!" The door slid open barely enough. I slipped through, slammed it shut as a metallic claw scraped the frame. The Regen wing was bathed in soft light, and there she was, floating in a biochamber, wings outstretched in healing fluid. She stirred, eyes opening. "Marcus," her voice faint through the chamber comms. "Is that you?" "We have to go," I said, searching for the control panel. "They're here. The things from Zone 7. "You can't," another voice cut in. A Velarion doctor emerged from a side room. "The regeneration is at a critical stage. If we move her now, her wings will never recover. If we don't move, she'll die," I snapped. "There are worse things than losing wings." The door behind me shook violently. They were almost through. "Is there an evac pod?" I asked. The doctor pointed. "Only one. End of the hall. Single capacity." I looked at Velarion. Her eyes said she understood. "I'm not going," she said, her voice stronger now. "This is my fault." I opened the gate. "Not the time for guilt," I said, slamming the release. Fluid drained. Tubes detached. The door finally burst. Shrapnel flew across the room. I turned, fired 2 last shots, slowing 1 bot but not stopping it. Velarion stepped out, wet, fragile, wings like torn silk. "To the pod," I said, pulling her along. The doctor led. A black blast hit him. He dropped instantly. Velarion screamed, "No time." We ran. The pod was there, small, cramped, I shoved her inside. "No!" she cried. "You have to come too." "No space," I said, glancing back. The bots were just meters away. "I'll find another." "You're lying," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Go," I said, gentle but firm. "She needs you more than I need to live." "She?" Velarion asked. "Your sister, Cerelia. She loves you, even if she never says it. And the Accord needs you, your curiosity, your compassion. The things Velarion refused to value, those are what will save them." I hit the launch. The door sealed. "Thank you," I said through the glass, "for reminding me that even in ancient empires, there are still people worth believing in." "Marcus!" she cried, hand pressed to the window. I turned. The bots were almost here. I had no weapon, no strength, but I stood tall. "Come on," I whispered. "Let's finish this." Then, an explosion. The wall beside me collapsed. Through the dust, a silhouette, tall, radiant, wings glowing with raw power. Cerelia, no restraint, no cold mask. Her eyes blazed with purple flame, and from her hands, pure energy. Cutting through bots like butter. 3 bots fell in seconds. She landed among the wreckage, wings still aglow. She turned to me. I braced, but then a single tear slid down her cheek. "My sister?" she asked. "Safe," I said, pointing to the escape pod, "on her way to the evac zone." Cerelia nodded, silent. She walked to the pod controls. Vellarion's image appeared. "Sister," she cried, "save him! He saved me!" "I know," Cerelia said softly. "I am." She turned, looked at me. No arrogance, no walls. "May I ask you something, human technician?" "Yes, Your Highness." "Why?" she asked. "Why risk so much for us? After all I've done to you?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. "How do you explain Maya?" Memories now erased. The belief that every being deserves to be saved. That sometimes irrational choices are the right ones? Instead, I just said, because it was the right thing to do. In that moment, something passed between us. Not between a princess and a servant, not between Velarion and human, but between 2 survivors. "They're coming from the ship's north quadrant," she said. "The guards are holding, but there are too many. We need to evacuate." "We can't," I replied. "If we run, they'll spread. We need to close the gate." "How?" "Zone 7's compromised." I looked into her eyes, and I realized something. "There's a way, but I need to know." "Your Highness, are you willing to break every Velarion law there is? Are you willing to work with a human?" She tilted her head, a gesture I'd seen Velarion make 100 times. "I think," she said, a near smile curling her lips, "I've broken enough rules today to do just that." The days that followed were a blur of controlled chaos, something only the Velarion could manage with such poise. The gate had been sealed. How, I'm still not allowed to disclose. The Accord's Emergency Response Division was summoned. Zone 7 was locked down again, this time with the latest technology and walls thicker and stronger than ever. I spent most of my time in the med bay, recovering from radiation damage and other wounds. Every day, the doctors looked at me with barely hidden astonishment. I should have been dead. No one survives the kind of exposure I'd taken. But I never told them the real price I'd paid to live. My memories of Maya, my sister. I knew she'd existed. I knew she died during a rescue mission, but I couldn't remember her face. I couldn't remember her laugh. Only facts remained. Cold, clinical, stripped of emotion. It was a steep price, but I didn't regret it. Not when I saw Velarion walk into the room, wings still bandaged but healing. Not when I heard her laughter echo down the halls of the Australis Prime. On the 7th day after the incident, I stood by a viewport, gazing out at the endless void, when I sensed someone approaching. I turned and saw Cerelia standing there, not in her formal regalia, but in something simpler, almost casual. "Walk with me," she said, not a command, but an invitation. That alone told me something had changed. I followed her through the corridors, noting how others reacted when they saw us. Not just shock at seeing me beside her, but surprise at the way Cerelia nodded to them as she passed. A gesture of respect, rare for her. We arrived at a small chamber with a massive window looking out into space, a meditation room as I'd heard it called, a place where Velarion came to reflect and attune with what they called the Dance of the Stars. "How do you feel?" she asked as the door slid closed behind us. "Better, Your Highness," I said. "Doctors say I might return to duty in a few days." "No," she shook her head. "You won't be returning to your old post." I froze. Here it was. Despite everything, despite saving Velarion and helping avert a catastrophe, I was about to be punished for breaking too many rules. Probably sent back to Earth, in disgrace. "The Royal Council reviewed your actions," she continued, her tone unreadable. "They evaluated the reports, examined the evidence, and they've reached a conclusion." She turned to face me, looking directly into my eyes, a gesture that would have terrified any lesser-ranked being in my position. "I owe you a life, Marcus Reeves, but more than that, I owe you honor you upheld in my place." I said nothing, unsure how to respond. "I couldn't save my sister," she continued, an admission that would have shaken any Velarion court. "All my power, all my privilege, all my training, it meant nothing. But you, a human technician with no special abilities, no advanced tech, you succeeded." "I just did what needed to be done," I murmured. "No," she corrected, "that's the difference. You didn't do what was needed, you did what was right." She stepped toward the window, gazing into the stars. "My entire life I believed a being's worth was measured in perfection, in emotional control, in pure logic," she said softly. "I looked down on younger species for being too emotional, too impulsive, too willing to act on instinct." She turned back, and for the first time I saw it, a smile, small, genuine. And then a human taught me that sometimes those instincts, compassion, sacrifice, empathy, are the very things that save us when logic fails. She stepped closer and I noticed her eyes. They were no longer deep violet, but a pure, crystalline blue. "When we face the precursors again, and I believe we will, we'll need more than logic. We'll need instinct, discipline, and heart. Velarion, strength, and human soul." She touched a small box on the nearby pedestal and opened it. Inside was a badge, one I'd never seen before. Not the rust-colored insignia given to human staff, but a badge of pure blue, adorned with a symbol I recognized, the same pattern woven into the wings of both Cerelia and Velarion. "The Council has created a new position," she said, "Interstellar Liaison. For now, it has one member." She lifted the badge and handed it to me. "If you accept, you'll work directly under myself and Velarion as a bridge between humanity and the Velarion." I stared at the badge, too shocked to speak. This wasn't a promotion. This was history. No human had ever been granted such authority aboard a Velarion vessel. "Why?" I finally managed. Cerelia looked out into the void again, silent for a long moment. "Humans don't need to be noble," she said gently. "They only need to be kind, and that is enough to shame us." She turned back, her blue eyes locking with mine. "Because you gave up the memories of your sister to save mine," she said. I flinched. She knew. "I don't know how you figured it out," I admitted. "The medics discovered gaps in your memory. They don't know what caused them, but I do. I can't give those memories back, but I can make sure your sacrifice wasn't in vain." She placed a hand on my shoulder, a sacred gesture of respect in Velarion culture. "Help us prepare, Marcus Reeves. Help us understand what pure logic cannot. Help us find compassion." Then her wings unfolded in a formal gesture I'd never seen, a salute reserved only for equals. And in that moment, I understood. The world had changed. Not just mine, not just Cerelia's or Velarions, but the entire relationship between humanity and Velarion. Because one technician dared believe a proud princess could change, and one proud princess dared admit she had been wrong. I never liked ceremonies, especially the kind where I stood at the center, hundreds of eyes fixed on me. But as I stood in the grand nebula hall aboard the Astralis Prime, wearing ceremonial robes I never thought I'd ever done, I realized this wasn't just about me. The hall was majestic, its high vaulted ceiling displaying a real-time star map of the galaxy. Representatives from every species in the Accord were present, from the spindly eight-legged Arxians to the four-armed Telurians, the glowing Tressians, and even a delegation from Earth I'd never met before. Today, Grand Duke Thalanil, father to Cerelia and Velarion, spoke, his voice resonating through the hall. We gather not just to commemorate a tragedy averted, but to acknowledge a new beginning. He looked down at me, and I saw something I never expected to find in a Velarion Duke's eyes: genuine respect. Marcus Reeves, he continued, has shown us that the value of a being is not measured by the lifespan of their species or the sophistication of their technology, but by the courage in their heart and the strength of their ethics. Behind me, standing in places of honor, were Cerelia and Velarion. No longer the distant princess and the curious sister, but two ambassadors of a new era. Velarion's wings had nearly healed. Only faint scars remained, which she refused to hide. Scars remind us of what was nearly lost, she told me. To honor courage and sacrifice, the Grand Duke went on, we hereby announce the formation of a new interstellar council, one that grants equal voice to all species, including humanity. A ripple of stunned murmurs spread through the crowd. Equality with Velarion? This was unheard of. And to lead this initiative, he declared, we appoint Princess Cerelia as Special Ambassador for Interstellar Relations, and Princess Velarion as Cultural Liaison. I turned to look. Velarion beamed with unrestrained joy, a clear violation of Velarion emotional decorum, and yet no one protested. In fact, a few young Velarion even smiled back. And now I present Princess Cerelia Velarion. Cerelia stepped forward, her wings lightly unfurled, a regal image. But when she spoke, her voice no longer carried its old icy detachment. For millennia, she began, we Velarion prided ourselves on emotional control, on the supremacy of logic. We looked upon younger species and saw their lack of restraint, their chaotic emotions. She paused, sweeping her gaze across the audience. We were wrong. The murmurs swelled. A Velarion, especially a princess, admitting fault openly? True balance isn't found in eradicating emotion, but in understanding it, respecting its strength. Compassion is not a weakness. It is a manifestation of true strength. She glanced at me, and a small, honest smile touched her lips. I learned this from a human, a simple technician who was willing to sacrifice everything, even his most precious memories, to save my sister. Not for glory, not for gain, but because it was the right thing to do. She turned back to the crowd. From this day forward, Velarion will lead not just with wisdom, but with compassion. We will not merely safeguard order, we will foster understanding. We will no longer stand apart, but walk alongside our allies. Velarion stepped up beside her sister, green eyes alight. And to begin this new age, she said, her voice bright and full of enthusiasm, I'm proud to announce that Earth will host the first Interstellar Cultural Conference next spring, a chance for all species to share not just technology, but art, music, and stories. Applause followed, not just from humans and other species, but from Velarion as well, many of whom had never engaged in such open displays of emotion. The ceremony ended, but the real work had just begun. In the months that followed, I worked closely with Cerelia and Velarion, building bridges between cultures once as distant as the stars. Velarion, with her boundless curiosity and love for all forms of life, became a sensation on Earth. Her wonder at simple things, ice cream, jazz, cats, especially cats, allowed humanity to see their own world through new eyes. Cerelia, on the other hand, brought sharp diplomacy and deep understanding to interstellar negotiations. She applied Velarion discipline to complex issues, now paired with a newfound openness to differing perspectives. As for me, I found my place in between, not Velarion, not fully human anymore, but someone who could translate misunderstanding into understanding. Someone who could build bridges where before there had been only chasms. Between Sirelia and me, there wasn't love. Not in the way stories usually tell it. Ours was something more nuanced, built on mutual respect, shared grief, and a commitment to a better future. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with a puzzled expression, as if I were a puzzle she still hadn't solved. And sometimes, during late nights working on difficult projects, I glimpsed the person behind the royal mask, a being with doubts, hopes, and private fears. "You will never tell anyone this," she once said one night as we stood at the observation deck, watching the stars, "but I still dream of Zone 7, of what I saw there." "So do I admitted, "but not the robots or the gate." "Then what?" "Maya," I said. "My sister, the one whose face I can't remember anymore." Sirelia was silent for a while. "If I could find a way to give those memories back to you, I'd still do it all again," I said, smiling. "Some things are worth the price." She looked at me, and in the starlight, I saw something I never expected, a look of sincere admiration. "Marcus Reeves," she said softly, "you've taught an ancient civilization, something we'd forgotten for millennia." "And what's that, Your Highness?" She turned back toward the infinite void. "That true worth lies not in perfection, but in the capacity to change." Sometimes the greatest changes begin with the smallest moments, a decision, a brave act, a truth spoken when silence would have been safer. Whenever I stand on the observation deck of the Astralis Prime, gazing out into the vastness of space with its billions of stars, I still feel small, a lone technician from a young planet in an ancient galaxy. But now I understand that value isn't measured in scale. Every morning I wake and see the blue insignia on my desk, a symbol of a position no one ever thought a human could hold. Each day I work alongside species who once would never have considered me their equal. And each night I dream of a face I can't remember, my sister Maya, who lives on in another way through the sacrifice I made. I didn't change the universe. I didn't rewrite the workings of the Alliance. I didn't even change the entire Velarion race, but I changed the heart of one proud soul. I see it every time Sirelia speaks with human ambassadors, not with restrained disdain, but with genuine curiosity. I see it when she asks about music, about literature, about the ways our young culture has found to express emotions her people spent millennia suppressing. I see it in how she defends her unpopular decisions before the Elder Council. "Emotion is not a sign of weakness," she declared during one meeting I was present for. "It is a tool, a sensory warning system, a different kind of wisdom." Today I received a gift, a photo recovered from Earth's archives, Maya smiling in her first science uniform. I don't remember this moment. I don't remember the pride I must have felt. To me now, she's the face of a stranger. And strangely, it doesn't hurt as much anymore. Because I know that my sacrifice saved 2 Velarion sisters. And through them, perhaps many more, when the precursors return someday. "Memories can be lost," Lyrian said to me when I showed her the picture. "But love isn't. My sister taught me that." As for Sirelia, she's still a Velarion princess, stern, calculating, and often too practical. But now, when we stand together atop the ship, watching the galaxy spin beneath us, I see her allow herself to smile sometimes. A subtle gesture, barely noticeable to others. But to me, it means everything. A week ago, at a meeting with New Earth delegates, one ambassador asked Sirelia what had changed her view of humanity. To my surprise, she didn't speak of policy or strategic advantage. "One human," she answered, nodding gently toward me, "who showed me that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it." Tonight, as I stand on the observation bridge, Earth appears as a distant blue speck. I think about the journey that brought me here, from a low-level technician mourning the loss of his sister to a bridge builder between civilizations. I'm not a hero, I'm not a genius. I'm just someone who chose to do the right thing in a moment that mattered. That's what I've learned from all of this. What makes humanity special isn't our strength. It's our choice to do what's right, even when no one believes we can. The universe is still out there, full of its mysteries. The precursors are still somewhere, waiting, and the future remains unwritten. But for the first time in a long time, I look ahead with hope, because I witnessed something no one thought possible. A Velarion princess changed her mind. And if that can happen, then maybe, just maybe, so can everything else. Sometimes the greatest change in the universe doesn't come from epic battles or superior technology, but from quiet, seemingly small moments when one person chooses to stand up and do what's right. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you be willing to sacrifice your most precious memories to save someone who once looked down on you? If you love deep, thought-provoking sci-fi stories like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next video. Every week, we explore the boundaries between humanity and the stars, between technology and the soul. Thank you for watching. See you on the next journey where stars collide and new stories begin.